Hello, my name is Bridget, and I am here with Dawn Roe, who's joining us via Skype. She's an artist currently in Asheville, North Carolina. Hello, Dawn. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you became an artist?
I'm from Sault Ste. Marie originally, grew up in Midland. And how I got started as an artist is, well, it kind of took a while, actually. I was a non-traditional student, went back to finish my undergrad a little later in life, in my sort of late 20s. I had a sister and brother that were very artistically inclined growing up, so that had a pretty big influence on me. But when I moved out to Portland, Oregon to just to live in my 20s, I ended up going to a school there and working with an instructor that had a pretty big influence on me, and got my BFA in photography and went straight away to do my MFA in studio art, and just kind of was always interested in looking at things photographically, though, so I just wasn't quite certain about the fact that I would pursue it as a career until a little bit later in life. So,
what was it about photography specifically that drew you to it?
My interest in the sort of vernacular snapshot photograph and our sort of fascination with that as a culture. It's something that has surrounded me personally on a daily basis since I was young, and I really enjoy the response that we have to something that is seemingly so commonplace. The sort of, in my own work, well, we can talk about that at some point, the trajectory of it. Lately it's landscape, but it originally had to do with just kind of capturing basic, ordinary, everyday moments, and there's something that's pretty fascinating about how that can be transformed in a photograph when, you're literally capturing and freezing time. So that has something to do with it.
You mentioned something about landscape is what you're focusing on now. Why don't you tell me more about your work in general, what it's about and what influences it?
Yeah, lately the subject matter is landscape, but that's been a really sort of sticky, I guess I could say, or interesting area for me to negotiate, because obviously landscape has this very huge history within the arts and within just as its own sort of genre. But I'm not necessarily a landscape photographer. It's not that I have any kind of implicit interest in nature, although clearly I do, because that's what I've been focusing on for the past about 4 years. It has more to do with the way that time is represented, or the way that landscape can be thought of as a metaphor for time and the passing of time. But my photographs are very still. It's not as though I'm literally capturing anything. You don't think of it that way, but nonetheless, every captured moment is still a captured moment. And especially if it's something like a landscape, which doesn't necessarily move, if you kind of reactivate that with a moving image and you play around with sort of wind or mist or very sort of subtle things moving through a space, then your attention is really drawn to that space differently than it might be in that still photographic image. So oftentimes my videos as well are kind of ridiculously slow and still, and I just kind of play each medium off of one another. Some of the videos are kind of like moving still photographs. Some contain a little bit more sort of montage cuts and things. And then it's the same with my photographs.
So is this the work that you will be showing for Art Prize?
Yeah, one of the pieces from a project that I did last year called The Tree Alone, a video piece will be shown. It's called The Tree Alone Part 1, 2, and 3. And it's a 3-channel video installation, and so that just means it has 3 videos running simultaneously, and they're edited to relate to one another. So when something happens in one sequence, something's happening next to it that's meant to relate in that way. It's the same tree, but seen a little bit differently, and there's some sort of very slow, slight movement, and the time just kind of loops back into itself. And that quote, actually, or that little phrase, "the tree alone," was actually from a line in a Virginia Woolf novel called The Waves, which was really influential to how I was thinking about that particular work. That work was really interesting to me in terms of her way of really poetically talking about the passing of time through metaphors of nature. I think the actual quote is something like, "The tree alone resisted our eternal flux, for I changed and changed. So I really liked thinking about that metaphor of the tree.
Since many viewers may not be aware of that specific metaphor and that reference to Virginia Woolf, what do you hope Art Prize viewers in general take from this work?
Yeah, that's always a really good question in terms of the intent of the artist and then what sort of, how much of that is important for the audience to kind of know. I personally think that that metaphor is really kind of simple and one that we just kind of all understand in a very intuitive way. I mean, when you stand in front of it, it is kind of meditative and also a little bit disorienting in a way in terms of how things are moving, and you're looking at three things and they're moving differently. So I'm hoping that if you're patient, and that's one of the, I don't know if it's a problem or not, but that's one of the things with a lot of my work is it's really slow and it's not really bombastic. It doesn't kind of just hit you. You have to kind of sit there and be a little bit patient and see what response you have to it. So I'm hoping that people will kind of start to get the sense of that subtlety of the passing of time. I hope.
I hope so too. Is this your first time taking part in Art Prize?
It is, yeah.
It's exciting.
It is. It worked out really well. I'm hoping to be able to come up for it. It would be a good excuse for me to come home for a minute.